It's 4 p.m. Wednesday, April 3rd. Calling the fiscal subcommittee meeting to order. At this time, we'll do a quick roll call. Mr. Mark?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Superintendent Danbro?
Here.
Assistant Superintendent McCaffrey?
Here.
Finance Director Bowl?
Here.
I'm present. And Mr. White? Not present. We have a quorum. This time, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a pretty light agenda this evening, given that this month is our budget month. We did cancel last month because the administration was putting together the budget, and we wanted to make sure they got that additional time. The budget was put together. It was released on Monday. Just before we get into the new business, I just want to commend Superintendent Danbrook, Assistant Superintendent McCaffrey, Mr. Bowl, and Dr. Taylor, and everyone else in the administration. I was very impressed with what I saw last Thursday before they distributed it. Everything's very clean and very easy to understand, and I think it's going to be a very nice and easy process to go through in comparison to possibly years past. I can only speak to 1 year right now, but it's a nice job to all of them, and I commend them. So we'll get into new business. First is Mr. Bowl, 2024 financial performance versus the FY24 budget.
So I shared with everyone my notes for the fiscal year 24 budget compared to actuals. There's not much change since the February meeting that we had in terms of which accounts are really the focus of a potential surplus versus deficit situation for the year. So I'll go at a high level from top to bottom again, but Medicaid reimbursements, again, on the revenue side are one area of focus where we're under budget. So I followed up with special education. There are a number of people who haven't logged their time in order to get Medicaid reimbursements. And so special education has been reaching out to those employees in order to get them to log their time in the system so that we do get reimbursed.
So before you continue on, this came up in the February meeting as well. Is there something that we should proceduralize and put in a policy to help out your back office with keeping up with this?
So I think first steps, the special education department really just reached out last week to those employees. So I think that's a good first step in terms of letting them sort of manage. But it could be good going into next year to formalize more of a procedure for collection, because we don't want to find out like after the year end what our actual revenues were for Medicaid.
Who would take that as an action item to go in place for to be instituted in the upcoming school year?
Our special services department.
So Jen and Dave. Okay.
Probably get office, like Nina McGurran, because Erin usually covers that.
She's more of like the day-to-day
Yeah,
person
yeah.
that works with them.
And how is that communication sent out? Is it just a phone call saying, hey, we have these people on a list?
Yeah, so I received a list of who was delinquent, not for to scold anyone or anything like that, but I just wanted to see how many employees there were that hadn't recorded their time. And then Nina was just going one by one, reaching out to everybody, asking them like if they could catch their time up.
Is there a way to automate that process to the leaders?
There could be, yeah, that would be good. I believe they're told to do it weekly. Obviously, there's always going to be people who wait to do it monthly or something like that, but there are some people who are more delinquent than that. So, yeah, we got to find a way to get it.
Yeah, because it would help us out with more accurate accounting. You know what I mean? Because what do you estimate right now? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but are we talking about a $200,000 difference from budget?
So I think the budget that was set last year in terms of 1.6 million is too high. So from what discussions I've had with our Medicaid accountant in the accounting department, she thinks we're going to land closer to $1 million. So we could be like $600,000 short. But again, I think we need to do some catch up on the actual logging of time to figure out where those revenues land before we know what the year-end number is gonna look like.
Do you think we should be putting a press on that, just so that way we don't have, you know, some sort of a deficit on that line item that could contribute to a total deficit on the whole budget?
Yeah, I can follow up. I'll follow up with Nina this week, just to see if there's been any progress in terms of people logging their time, and then if there hasn't been any progress, I can sort of start pushing more.
If you want me at that meeting,
Yeah.
so we can streamline the process.
Yeah. I think it just needs to be emphasized, because I think it's viewed as like an administrative burden to the people who are doing it, which I understand, but it's super important to the district that we actually get those funds.
Yeah.
So to emphasize the importance of it, I think will help.
Okay, so I think frequency will help with that. And as a managing my team, we have a target process procedure that we have to do, and it's every other week that we get our emails out, and it's, hey, these people haven't done the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Comes out, and we get an email every 6 hours until those people get their stuff logged in, because we're all tax credit approved. So it's a similar situation with Medicare and Medicaid, and every other week you get that email. It's got a big red exclamation point to it, and it's almost like getting one of those like walk of shame type of flyers. Where, like, hey, don't be on this list.
That would be good.
So if we increase the
Something like that would be
frequency
ideal.
of communication, I think that might actually help kind of drive the whole, like, hey, this is that important.
I wonder if we use a Google form, like send out a Google form
Yeah,
every week.
that would be
She can
good
see
with the list
respondents
attached.
at one glance, and she can see who responded, who didn't, and then she can resend it.
So for expenses, nothing here should be surprising. These are pretty much unchanged since our last meeting, other than the numbers themselves, but still the pace at which we're incurring these expenses is pretty much the same. So overtime, again, we were over budget on overtime in the first month of the school year, just because of the summer overtime that was worked. We did budget additional funds for overtime in fiscal year 25, and we anticipate that number being lower in general, just because the summer projects are gonna be lighter this summer compared to last. So the additional overtime that we budgeted should cover what we're gonna incur next school year. Health benefits, again, this is an area of focus right now for myself, because we're currently spending less than we spent last year at this time for healthcare benefits, despite the fact that we budgeted 20.16 million. So we are still on target to be considerably under budget. Last year, we ended the year with 18.31 million in healthcare expenses. So again, potential to be like $1 to $1.5 million under budget, which would be very helpful for the surplus situation. Private pension, again, we budgeted less than the actuary's recommended contribution last year, which the state auditor general brought to our attention. So for fiscal year 25, we have budgeted the actuary's recommended contribution. But for fiscal year 24, we're going to be over budget on that line, because we're accruing the expense as it's incurred. So we're already over budget.
That's what I was just about to ask. So that anticipated 1.8 million addresses the Auditor General's note that we received at, what was it, year's end last year?
Yep.
Okay.
And we made the contribution for fiscal year 23, but again, the contribution for fiscal year 24 is going to be 1.8 million. So we're going to be $800,000 over budget on that line item.
Chris, for your benefit, at the end of the year last year, the Auditor General sent a letter to the school committee and the school department that we were underfunding one of the pension plans.
Okay.
So they, Brandon and the administrative team rectified that, and so that's what's driving that line item in our budget up.
And now, at the end, and forgive my naivety, but at the end, we can like reallocate. So like the 1.8 potential million that we saved for the healthcare benefits, can that monies be reallocated?
Yeah, so we can do budget transfers to cover expenses elsewhere. It's not the most ideal situation. Obviously, we want to have a plan that's accurate for the upcoming year. But I would think of surpluses in that way, where, you know, if we know that healthcare is gonna be surplus to some extent, those funds can be used elsewhere. At
And
the
that,
end of the year, the goal is just not to run an overall deficit.
Understood.
and that would be the hopes of this committee, to eventually work with the administration to have those types of transfer conversations, change order requests, and purchasing discussions here. And so that way, everything goes as one finance packet to the school committee.
Maintenance, repair, HVAC expense, this isn't gonna be a surprise to anyone, but we've expensed $216,000 after budgeting $120K. This is again due to the ongoing HVAC issues of vets, so just wanted to call attention to that. Transportation is another line item that we're paying attention to, similar to health benefits, where we're underspending quite a bit, given where we are in the year. So for fiscal year 24, we budgeted about 11.7 million. We've only expensed 6.7 million to date, and we're 3/4 of the way through the year. So similar to healthcare, we're hoping to run a surplus in that line. Out-of-district tuitions, again, are accurate to the budget, so nothing to really worry about there. Electricity, I've got some notes on the second page for electricity as well, but right now we've expended 600K. I've asked our green development, who we work with on our net metering credits, if they think like 850 to 900K would be accurate for the year, and they agree with that figure. So we should surplus about 300,000 on the electricity line. Our electricity costs are gonna go up 30 to 40% in October, which is when our agreement with the current supplier expires.
Was that a 1 or a 2-year agreement?
That was for electricity. I would have to get back to you on that. It was actually a 3-year agreement. So we were locked in paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which anytime we've shown someone that rate, they're sort of stunned by it, that we got such a beneficial rate. But the quotes that we're getting right now through our broker are closer to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. It doesn't sound like a huge difference, but when you consider the amount of electricity we use as a district, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in increased expenses that we're gonna have next year. But the net metering credit should help offset some of that, so.
Is that the solar credits that we have?
Yeah, so those offset all of our invoices across the district. But so the net cost that we're going to end up paying this year is like the 850 to 900K that I cited before.
Yeah.
So I would just assume next year's electricity costs are gonna be closer to like 1.2, 1.3, which is what we've been budgeting. We've just been surplusing on that line.
Are we preparing that bid for the new supplier?
Yeah, so we're in discussions right now with a broker who goes out to obtain pricing from different energy suppliers. They've provided quotes from 5 of the larger ones in the area, and then we just have to decide who we go with.
Okay.
And they give pricing based on terms of the contract too. It could be a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year contract, depending on what we want to do. Technology software costs, that hasn't really changed since the last meeting. That was just to show that line item specifically is a larger expense in the slightly over budget. What else do we have here? So at this point, we've spent about 64.8% of the budget. So the 185.91 million that we had budgeted for fiscal year 24, we've expended 120.51 million.
Is that March 31st?
That's as of March 31st. So through 3/4 of the year, and we've spent 64.8%. The same time last year, we spent 64.9%. Ran a $700,000 surplus. So still confident that, given where we are in terms of spend, that we'll run a surplus in fiscal year 24 again. We did have the benefit of ESSER funds in fiscal year 23 that we don't have this year to help cover any sort of like specific deficits. But I don't think as of now, we're concerned with running a deficit in '24.
Cool.
I just have a note here on the open bids for quotation. Bill and I met with the transportation department and met with First Student today to discuss their bid for transportation. And we're gonna have a follow-up meeting next week to talk to their finance director about their proposal, just to discuss the cost escalations that they're proposing and sort of us just trying to get what we want out of the agreement as well. The meeting was good, it was productive. I think both sides understand what we need and what the issues have been in the past. So we're just trying to make sure with the new contract that we cover whatever those gaps have been. For state aid, I just have our fiscal year '25 state aid number there. It was revised down. There was a number that RIDE had received from the extraordinary cost report for special education that they believe was incorrect, and so they revised our state aid number downward to this 45.38 million. But we do have, from the second census date that they take every year, we had an additional 40 students. So we should be receiving additional aid in the next couple months. I don't know what that exact figure is. I would estimate like 250K in state aid. It's not huge numbers, but it'll be something. Yeah.
But that would be applicable to FY '25, correct?
Yep. And then I just had a note about the resolution you said. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, we've got, so we have transportation next and then that resolution.
I'm probably getting ahead of myself.
No, don't worry about it, this is great.
So then I won't talk about the fiscal year '25 budget yet, because you have a note here to discuss that in new business. Already talked about electricity, and then Steve Goffberg and I met last week with a solar energy provider, just to discuss the possibility of potentially using roof space in the district for solar energy. Mr. Goffberg has some concerns about the structural integrity of roofs and whether or not they can handle the panels. So that's something that we addressed with the solar provider, but we're gonna get some quotes in general just to see what they can offer. It was kind of an interesting conversation. They don't only supply solar electricity. If it's determined that like the amount of energy that panels are gonna generate won't actually benefit the district, or we won't generate enough to offset our electricity, they'll still pay to rent space on rooftops. So that's always an option as well. That's all I have from my side.
Does it have to be active school space? Can they use like some of the closed down school spaces?
I don't think they wouldn't be able to use Aldrich because we no longer own that building. I'm not sure about the other buildings though. It's a good question. It's evolved. They asked us for our, they want to know the square footage of all our buildings, and Steve is going to provide the blueprints to them.
I would open it up to every building, whether or not there's a child in there or not.
Yeah.
If it's square space that they can utilize and the school has ownership over it, I mean, that should be constituted and allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, Aldrich would have been a great place if we had ownership of that, and it's not even
a lot of space.
A lot of space, and overload it if you needed to and stack up the inside to support that.
And there is, one of the benefits of the whole program is that so we don't actually incur any of the like maintenance costs and things like that, even the costs of the panels themselves. And the trade-off for them is that they don't have to go out and buy real estate, right? They're just like using ours or leasing our space. So we don't incur like regular expenses like maintenance fees or management fees or anything like that.
Another question is, if the space is closed down and not already utilized for the school, can you get an additional tax credit for the land, now changing the usage of it instead of it being educational? It's maybe like farmland or like solar farms, you know?
Yeah.
It might be a different tax credit overall.
We're not subject to tax credits as a non, I don't know if we call ourselves a nonprofit or like a quasi-government entity, so we don't get the benefit of the credit.
Yeah. Too bad.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Bowl on the 2024 financial performance year to date? See Seeing none. Next item, discussion update, new transportation contract, Mr. McCaffrey.
As Brendan had said earlier, it's going out to bid, there's been an RFP, there's been one company that responded. First group had responded. At this point, we're meeting with them, doing our due diligence and making sure that the contract supports the students.
And we had a discussion, and it's my understanding that the potential increase in cost for that contract has been factored into the FY25 budget. So,
Yes.
Does the bid include rerouting and reorganization of all the routes? And I ask that because, my house is right in front of an elementary school pickup, and 3 different buses cross that school pickup.
We do our own routing annually,
Okay.
so maybe the stops vary annually, based upon where the student population is. So we do adjust routing in the summer months, for the different schools.
Gotcha.
any other questions for Mr. McCaffrey? Seeing none, next item is discussion update, governor's proposed FY25 funding formula resolution. So Brandon did, Mr. Bold did I apologize. Mr. Bold did an analysis of what the proposed funding formula will mean for us with our FY25 budget. It's shown an approximate $1.3 million shortfall in state aid. So after we went through that, last month on the 12th, the school committee passed a resolution requesting that our state legislator and everyone at the General Assembly evaluate the governor's funding formula. It passed unanimously with our school committee. Additionally, there's several other cities and towns that have signed on, and we used the same resolution, all of us, so that way there was strength in numbers. I've sent it off to all of our representatives, the state senator, the House Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, the governor, and thus far, we've had good responses from our local delegation, all stating that they would do what they could to support the community of Warwick, and that they were in support of the facts and figures that we provided to them. We indicated the estimated shortfall. We emphasized our growing special services population, and we also talked about our increase in multi-language learners. So just wanted to give you an update on that. If you talk to anybody, anyone in the public that is viewing this at a later time, please reach out to your local state representative or state senator and ask them to consider the resolution passed forward by the Warwick School Committee and Warwick School Department. Any questions on that? Seeing none, next item is discussion update, FY25 budget hearing process. So we have the budget hearings occurring on the Tuesday, the 23rd, 6 p.m. and Tuesday, the 30th at 6 p.m. One update I want to give is because of the changes that we made in our budget preparation policy, which gets the budget to the school committee by the close of business on the first business day in the month of April. We now have 3 weeks time to basically go through and start evaluating it. Plus some of the changes made by the administrative team and how they've kind of cleaned up their process and beat it up before it gets to us. It should make it a much easier and expeditious process for us to go through. Where asking questions and getting information should be a lot faster. So I'm very confident that there's enough time between the date in which Mr. Bold distributed the budget to the first time we would hear it, that April 23rd should be sufficient enough for us to go through the entire budget process. So we will not only do the hearings, of all of the functional budget owners on the 23rd, but we'll also go into the budget review with the school committee. And we'll use April 30th as an if necessary date. The other thing that I would just comment on is we're going to treat that meeting like it's a typical open meeting. So there will be public comment at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, 3 minutes. One thing I am evaluating with our attorney is whether or not we want to allow questions. When you get into that, obviously, the questions will be more so directed to the budget owners themselves. But I don't anticipate on the spot there would be a change that was made unless it was valid. So we're weighing all of that right now, but public comment will be still afforded during that. Any questions regarding the FY25 budget hearing process? Anyone opposed to wrapping it up in one night, given that we have 3 weeks to kind of come in? I would just comment, for members of the public that are viewing this at a later date, the administration was very kind to offer to the school committee to come in at any point over the next several weeks to have meetings with the budget owners. So it doesn't necessarily mean if we only ask 1 or 2 questions that evening that we're just rubber stamping and moving it along. Those on the committee have the opportunity to come and ask questions over the next 3 weeks. So it's very nice that we have the budget this far in advance of the hearing. All right, the last item is discussion update. Determine how fiscal school subcommittee can approve purchases. So I've brought it up several times over the last 3 months. What I would ideally like is that this group kind of beats up the purchase requests or asks questions of the purchases in advance of the school committee meeting. So that way, when they get to the school committee, it's already been analyzed and assessed. Dr. Taylor brought up a very good point. How can we do that when typically at the regular school committee meetings, you'd have the requesting party present as well? So does that mean the requesting party would come to this meeting and also the school committee meeting? If, let's say, a school committee member says, I'm good with the whole packet being approved, but please remove those 2 purchase recs. So I just wanted to round out this meeting with looking for suggestions on how you feel we could do that. Certainly tonight we talked about change orders and transfers, and we'll get to that later on in the year here and getting that into this subcommittee, but really trying to have this subcommittee be a real benefit to the full school committee. So I'll start the dialogue. My initial thought is that we would have the requesting party possibly dial into the Google Meet. They would all get an invite, and then they can join into the Google Meet if they have a purchase request. And then at the regular full school committee, assuming our director of finance is comfortable with it, then they're picking up speaking to the expenditure as our CFO of the school department. If that's something you're not comfortable with, or if you think that there's a more efficient or effective way of doing this, or if there's another option that somebody has, I open it up for dialogue.
So would they even need to speak at school committee if they had presented here?
I think in speaking historically, the reason why school committee's done what they've done with reviewing each one of those items individually was for transparency with the public.
Yeah.
However, now with the technology that's available within the subcommittees, I don't think that would be necessary.
Yeah, that's my thought, because at city council meetings, they just pass the packet, right? They don't actually have anyone come up and speak, so.
The finance subcommittee does ask questions of the requesting party. We'll take, for instance, the other night, the police came forward with a $250,000 request for ammunition. The Sergeant Sullivan, he came forward and he answered the questions of the purchasing committee. But one thing that benefits them as well is that those meetings are held before the full city council meeting, so the councilors are sitting on the outside and they can then ask a question.
Right.
So the ideal thing would be that all of the subcommittees would start to run more efficiently and within a 30-minute period, so that way you can then have them all before the regular full school committee meeting and get everything all done in one evening.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That's the goal. So the administrative table, let's say, I know Ms. Necco is present with us in the room. She serves on policy. She would sit at the administrative table during policy. And anyone like myself who's not on policy, I would just go up and take my seat as normal.
Yeah.
And I would watch them hold their meeting. Everything would be live broadcasted as normal with the normal technology that we have. And then if there's a question, we could ask at that time. And so that way, when they pass their stuff, it comes just before full committee.
Yeah.
All in one evening, very clean cut, all transparent, all before the public. So if we can refine our processes within our subcommittees, then that could all happen.
Yeah.
So do you have any anybody have any thoughts on the finance piece?
Just to add a little bit, kind of going back to the past, because we've done it a few different ways, and maybe pieces of what we used to do could help inform this new process and I'll give you an example, right? So let's say we've presented the budget, and we're gonna have our budget hearing on April 23rd. And optimistically, we're gonna be done with our budget hearing on April 23rd. But in the budget, and I'll just pick on myself for an example, I place in the budget, $38,500 from Microsoft licensing, 2,000 users. I just made that up. That may not be at all right, but I placed that in the budget. So it used to be at one point in time, because I put that in the budget, transparency. The school committee has reviewed it, transparency. The school committee's asked me questions about it previously in the budget hearing, or now in the 3-week between the 1st and the 23rd. Then on July 1st, I would just be able to buy it because it's gone through those same checkpoints. Then a few years ago, we started adding to that process. Well, let's bring it back before the school committee, an item that was already voted on and approved by the budget process, the same line item. Back when we used to do it that way, we did have some stipulations. If the amount of money that was brought before the school committee had changed to be a higher amount, then you had to put it on the school committee agenda and bring it back before them again, because that isn't what they approved in April or May. Also, another stipulation was if a budget manager wasn't clear in the line item, if I just said software, and I didn't specify exactly what I was looking to do, meaning you didn't have the opportunity to ask me exact questions on that item, then we had to bring it before the large school committee meeting again. So there were stipulations to that, but that's how it used to work, which meant that 41 items would be down to a manageable dozen or so anyway.
Yeah.
Because just those things that haven't met muster would go through.
So you're basically eliminating all the recurring expense.
Absolutely, and it was, this process I described was only on annual renewal kind of things or budgeted specifically items that was well detailed in the budget process. So, because the purpose was, does the community have a chance to see what we're spending money on? Yes, because of the transparent budget process. Does the school committee know what we're spending money on? Yes, because it was in the budget and you have asked questions on it during that time. Anything past that had to go to the school committee, no matter when it was, to seek approval.
So it looks like we'd have to send something to policy that would have that language in there to give that autonomy back to the budget owners.
Yeah, it used to be just through a direction of the chair at the time, and then as chairs change, it would change, but a policy move would make good sense. That would be our purchasing policy, to just streamline it. Then now you're taking off the table, even for this subcommittee, you're able to talk about change orders. Why are those important? Because that wouldn't have been part of the budgeting process 6 months ago. Transfers, same reason, right? We should discuss transfers because that's not part of the budgeting process. But, the kind of things I mentioned is, the program that I just bought and been buying for the last 6 years that's been approved again for purchase, that is taking up one of the 41 items on the monthly agenda.
So maybe if I could make a suggestion, what I'll do is I'll extract the policies relative to what you've just discussed, send it to the committee here. We put our suggestions on there. I'll take the action item of getting those and collating them and putting them in, and then we just kind of beat it up a little bit and send our suggestions to the policy subcommittee for their next meeting in early May.
It essentially just brings it down to variable costs.
Variable costs, which I really believe is where transparency needs to be for our school committee and our public. Anything
I
that
like that
wasn't.
idea, because a lot of these subscriptions are built in year over year. Especially like to your point, like the software stuff, that's, some of those Microsoft products haven't changed.
No.
They had their first one in beginning of 23, I think, and they haven't changed it 5 years prior, 5 years after. I think they're locking in on pricing. So
That's a good call.
yeah, a lot of that could alleviate some of that.
And beyond me, right? If we were to pick a random example that is carried in a different budget, it's the membership to the associations, that's carried in different budgets. Certainly those are presented during the budget process, annual, always approved. So that's an example of a non-software thing, but we bring it up to the school committee as one of our 41 items currently. So there's a lot of items in our budget, curriculum materials that are purchased annually, software programs, hardware that's purchased on an annual basis. It really would clean up, I think, a lot of, and help use what you're looking to do, I believe, with these meetings to really focus it on the variable. I like how you put that, the variable changes.
Cool. No, I like it. Good call outs. Do you guys see any issue with that action item of us looking at those policies, figuring out how we can address those variable costs
No,
within that.
I would just include purchasing in the conversation because they're the most well-versed. That's everyone's point of contact in the district for the school committee rules.
Would you forward the email on to them? Because I'm still learning the org chart.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss anybody.
Kayla.
Yeah, to Kayla, she should be aware of any sort of changes to purchasing policy.
Great. Cool, good call outs.
That's a good idea.
Anything else on determining how the fiscal subcommittee can approve purchases? Seeing none. Last item here, public comment. Individual comments will be respectfully limited to 3 minutes per person, with public comment not to exceed 45 minutes, though the content of comments will not be restricted. It is the hope of this committee that citizens, committee members, and the administration alike will be respectful of each other's right to speak, tolerant of different points of view, and mindful of everyone's time. Any comments from the public?
Not today.
All right.
I'll save those for the actual budget meetings.
Oh, go easy on us. Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Danbrook. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bowles. We are adjourned at 4:36 PM.